Today we're going to talk about the steps my husband and I took to purchase our second investment property from our first investment property. If you stick around until the end, you'll also hear how we attempted to get our second investment property using Dave Ramsey's recommended approach and why that didn't work for us. So this video is officially in the I Disagree with Dave playlist. The very first thing that my husband and I did is we got a line of credit approved for our first investment property. We paid that property off really quickly because at that time we were able to make full mortgage payments and then extra mortgage payments because I was still working my corporate job. And we had tenants in there and we were letting their rent also contribute to paying down the mortgage. So we were effectively making triple mortgage payments in addition to be able to put a lot of money down on it. We paid that property off in about 2.5, maybe 3 years. I think it was 2.5 years. So when we went looking for a line of credit, we were able to get 80% the value of the property. To get the line of credit, we did have to have an appraisal of the property done so that the bank could feel confident in the value that they were offering to us. So I can't remember the exact details, but let's say that property is considered worth $230,000 and we were able to get then 80% of the equity. Since the property is paid off, we got 80% of that. So I believe that we're able to borrow about $190,000 through our line of credit. What's really wonderful about this as well is that we were able to get the line of credit in the name of our business. I think there are a lot of things that landlords can do in order to protect themselves. But one of the most important things is to create a company, a limited liability company, and put the name of the property and any bank accounts associated to your rental income in the name of the business. What this does is it says, hey, there's a separation between my business and my personal life. And if something happened and somebody wanted to sue the business, they can't come after me personally. They can only go after the business and the monies that are in the business accounts. What's really great about the line of credit is since we had all of that established and the property is owned by the line of business, and because the property is owned by the LLC, we were able to get the line of credit in the name of the business, which means now that liability is owned by the business. Of course, my husband and I are considered the guarantors, so if the business ever couldn't pay that, the bank itself could come after us personally, but no tenant would be able to. A few things to remember about a line of credit. First off, the payments that are going to be required of you from a line of credit, whether that's a business line of credit, a personal line of credit, a HELOC, they're typically interest only. Our particular line of credit is in a 2-year term, so every 2 years we have to renew the line of credit, which means that whether we paid off only interest or whether we paid off more, we have to go to the bank every 2 years and prove to them that we're still good for the line of credit, pay an annual renewal fee, and then move forward from that. It's important to remember, though, that if you're only paying the interest, the bank might say, hey, I don't like this. I expect you to pay some principal, and they could always pull the rug out from under you. So I will talk about this a little bit later, but we do have a strategy to pay more than just interest only on that line of credit. Once we had the line of credit secured, we were like super gung-ho to find a property, and this took a little bit longer than I thought it would. Actually, a lot longer than I thought it would. We had the line of credit approved for 1.5 years before we were able to find a property we were willing to pull the trigger on. Well, that's not entirely true. We did put offers out on a few other properties, but they were rejected. Sometimes I think people think landlords and investments, people who are seeking properties for investment, are going to jack up the cost of properties in the area, and this isn't really true. Those of us who are buying properties for investment purposes, we need these properties to cash flow positive. Because of the cost of the properties, plus because of the higher interest rates, it's really challenging to find a property that you can charge reasonable rent for and still cash flow positive. Because of this, it took us a very long time to find a property, and the property that we found was not in the best shape. That being said, we got really lucky that we stumbled across a property that we were literally the very first people to do a walkthrough of the property. We walked through the property, and that evening we made an offer on it. Actually, correction. That evening we walked through it, I came home and did a cash flow analysis. If you guys are curious about what goes into my cash flow analysis, let me know and I can always create that as a separate video. But I completed the cash flow analysis, and then from there, I was able to say, hey hun, I think this is a good one. We should make an offer on this. We prayed about it, and then we went ahead and made the offer. Initially, the sellers declined. They knew that it was the very first weekend that the property was on the market, and they knew that they had several other people that had already scheduled walkthroughs. We countered and we offered them a little bit more. They denied that one as well. And then we said, okay, I guess this isn't the one for us, because again, it's really important that our property cash flows positive. If it doesn't do that, then we'll be losing money every month, which is just obviously not the objective of investments. However, again, luck would have it that the owners realized that our offer was really desirable, because remember that line of credit that I mentioned? When you purchase a property with a line of credit, from the perspective of the buyer, it's like it's a cash offer. The reason for that is because we already have the money secured. We already have the loans secured. Unlike a conventional loan or a first-time homebuyer's loan, the bank is going to be much more involved in the acquisition of that property. They're going to want to get an appraisal done, and they're going to want to do a lot of income verification. There are a lot of things that the bank can do to influence whether or not the deal fails. There was an urgency for these sellers because the husband had already accepted a job in a different state and really had a month to relocate. So even though we walked away from it after they denied our second offer, they came back to us the following morning and said, you know what, it's a cash deal and this feels like the safest bet given our needs. We were able to move forward. The third thing that we really had to understand was how much cash we needed on hand in order to make this a good deal for our future selves. Anytime we are making investments, we don't just want to think about what it's going to take right now, but what it's going to take down the road. We knew that we would be able to have enough cash in the account to do the 20% down payment that we really wanted to do, because we know in time we would like to convert this line of credit into a commercial mortgage. But on top of that 20%, we needed to have other things still in the bank account. We needed to have the deposits for our current tenants, because if either of them moved out, we needed to be able to return their deposit to them, assuming there was no damage to the rental units that they're in. In addition, we had to make sure we had enough cash to cover the repairs that would be coming up. So while we were in the inspection period prior to the closing, we had about 8 contractors come to the property. We had a painter come in, we had multiple fence companies come in, we had concrete people come in for the driveway, we had roofers come in, we had everybody come in, and we recognized that we would want to pay for all of these repairs prior to getting the property rented out. We wanted cash to cover all of that. But as you can see from my spreadsheet, I do a form of budgeting called cash flow budgeting. So it's a little bit of a budget and a forecast. And you can see we have some things coming up. One, we know that we'll have to pay the property taxes for both this property and our first investment property near the end of the year. In addition to that, we'll have to pay for property insurance for this property. Knowing that those things were coming up and that they're pretty big price tags, we knew that we needed to have a certain amount of cash on hand. With that in mind, that really determined for us how much of the line of credit was used. We didn't want to use so much cash from our business that we ended up shortchanging ourselves and having to do a second draw from the line of credit just to cover our obligations that we knew were coming. We really wanted to borrow as little as possible. So with this forecast budget in mind, we recognized exactly how much money we had to pull from the line of credit in order to get to closing. When we arrived at closing, we really had 2 checks. We had one from our bank that was a cashier's check for the down payment, essentially. And then we had another check from the line of credit, which was for the remainder of the property purchase value. After closing, we moved really quickly. We had all of the repairs completed really fast, like within 2 weeks, maybe within 2.5 weeks, everything was done. Then we came in and we scoured that place. We cleaned it very well. We even hired our daughter to come in and help us with the cleaning because we did the cleaning ourselves. And then we posted the property on Zillow. As a landlord, you are able to rent properties out through Zillow. We love their process because an applicant for a tenant applicant will have to pay a fee, but that fee then includes capturing information about their pay, their credit history, their criminal background. It really informs us as a landlord as to whether or not they are consistent in making their payments and whether or not they've been evicted anywhere in the past. This is really important information, and again, really important for anybody wanting to become a landlord to have processes like this in place. Oh, I guess I should bring this up too. We do permit dogs at the properties that we rent. We are a pet house. We have a dog and a cat. We might not always have a cat, but we probably will always have a dog. We do permit dogs in our rental properties, and one of our stipulations is that we meet the dog in person. So once we had approved them for the rental property, we scheduled a meeting where they came and did the walkthrough of the property. They noted down any damage to the place that they wanted to have pre-recorded. It was required for them to bring their dog. We watched their dog in the property. We made sure that they weren't showing aggressive behavior and that they seemed friendly enough. And then finally, we had them, we did a complete walkthrough of the lease itself where we talked through every point of it so there could be no room for misunderstanding or confusion, and then we all signed it, handed over the keys, and headed back home. Now, in the future, like I said, we do want to have that property converted into a commercial loan. Right now, it seems like rates are going down and we're really biding our time. We have our banker on the line. He knows what our plans are and he's ready to prepare for us that loan as soon as we're ready to pull the trigger. All right, if you have hung out this long, here's my insight into Dave Ramsey's recommendation on how to get your second investment property. We had already taken out the mortgage on the first investment property really prior to understanding Dave's position on this. And then as soon as we understood Dave's position, and frankly, because we love being debt-free, we paid off that first investment property really quickly. Then our goal was to build up that bank account, that business bank account that we have, so that we could have the cash in there to purchase the second investment property. But two things kind of prohibited us from ever getting to that point. One is that I quit my corporate job, and so my income is literally a third of what it used to be. But in addition to that, the value of houses skyrocketed. So when we first came up with the plan, we really thought we could buy a home comparable to what we just purchased for, honestly, around $130,000. By the time COVID was done, that same home was, well, I wouldn't even say when COVID was done. Probably like midway through COVID, that house was now worth around $180,000. So imagine we're chugging away, we're saving up money, but it's like every time we would save to here, because this is what we thought it would cost, the new price we needed was here, and then we'd save to there, and the new price was there. And then, then that property would need a new roof. So then it was down to here, and I don't know, it was just all moving around. Like the amount of money that we needed, the amount of money that we needed in order to acquire the property kept getting higher, and we just never could quite get there because then something would happen and we'd be back down here. It is like we would just get about halfway and then have to spend money. So finally we just realized, honestly, about a year and a half ago, we realized we should just get the line of credit already and let the first property acquire the second property and then pay that line of credit off as quickly as we can. We would essentially, if we have all of our units rented, we would have 3 doors that could contribute toward paying off the line of credit, in addition to whatever my husband and I can throw at it just from our own earnings. That being said, I still think Dave's approach could be wonderful for someone. I just don't know who. I mean, you'd have to have access to a lot of money to be able to grow to grow the balances in your business bank accounts fast enough to keep up with the cost of housing. The only time I think you could really make that work, honestly, is if we slipped into another recession that caused the housing market to depreciate. So if it ends up being another thing like 2008, where, the house we owned at that time went from being worth $180,000 to being worth $120,000 in the blink of an eye. In that situation, sure, you would be really well positioned with your cash to capture one of those properties. But I don't really see that happening in the near future. And I think that 2008 was a really remarkable circumstance where the recession was triggered by the housing market to begin with. So at this point, if I'm being 100% forthright with you, I don't know that it's possible to save up enough money from one investment property to have it pay for the second investment property. Not unless you were coming up with other incomes to contribute to that pot of money so that eventually you could get there. I don't see how it would work. So there you have it, guys. That is how we ended up with our second investment property. I hope this video is really helpful and informative to you, and I will see you in the next one.